I've obviously introduced myself at the start of today. My name is Clint Adams. We are very lucky to have Mr. Matthew Irving today. I'm pretty confident most of you in the room know who Matthew is, or Matt, or Ask Irvo, for those of you that follow him on socials and are keenly staying across his life. So on the topic of staff, I just want to mention we've got more Waterpro team members in the room today. Is Caesar here still? Where is he? I've lost him right in front of me. So Caesar's actually here on his day off. So today was an annual leave day, but I don't know if he was forced to come or chose to come. But Caesar's working in our irrigation design department. It's what we're going to be talking about today. So I do encourage you, if you do have questions that you want to talk to us about, Caesar's here. Chris, who manages that department, is also somewhere in the middle of the room. And obviously both Matthew and I are here today if you do have questions. So a bit about Matthew. I'll cover off what I know and then you can kind of cover what I don't. I'll try to be polite for those of you that have been out with Matthew and I at night. My stories about him tend to be a little bit more not from the correct book, but we'll try to keep it kind of straight and narrow today. So there's not too many people that have the experience that Matt has. He's worked in all facets of irrigation, from installation to working inside our retail outlets to working in a design field. So you're getting close to 20 years, which is hard to believe. I think I read before Michael was 40 years in the industry. I don't know how old he was when he started, but he doesn't look old enough to have done 40 years, and I feel the same about Matt. But so early career, Matt was working, as a teenager still? Were you 18?
20.
So 20.
Yeah.
Matt started working for Aquatech, which was an irrigation design firm, which some of you in the room would probably be across, and Darren Ferber was his first irrigation leader. From that, Matt moved into a retail sales role at Waterpro at Stepney, which might be a store some of you are across. At the time, he was the most qualified team member in the building, and the other two were both owners of the business, one of them being me. And so we kind of found that quite interesting that he'd come off the street and just popped into our world and had a Cert 3 in irrigation, had been working in irrigation design for years prior. During that, I guess after how many years, couple of years with Waterpro, you went out on your own?
I was about 18 months.
And was doing residential installation. So did that for a little while, and then I don't know how I managed to, but I got him back, and he's climbed the ranks to now be the general manager of Waterpro and Lawn Hub, and takes care of making sure I don't go to jail or go bankrupt because of some of the things that I get up to. So today I thought we've done open spaces now, like I said, 4 years, and as much as Waterpro is an irrigation business, it was really important that we didn't just make this about irrigation, but I think that it's probably about the right time to be discussing what we're going to discuss today. So I just want to really just I didn't miss anything on the intro?
No, that's good.
Just wanted to really kind of get Matt to lay the foundation as to why it's so important that we're talking about this today. You'll notice in the book we're talking about specification, design, inspection, and audits of open spaces. And so I guess if you can just cover off briefly why that's so important and why now is the time that we should be talking about that.
Yeah, thanks, mate. And thanks again for everyone being here today. It's pretty cool to be able to talk to people that I guess I've worked with, as Clint said, for probably the last 20 years. I've dealt with a lot of you guys from being, I guess, a young person as well. So yeah, I think it's important that we talk about specification and design and auditing. I guess it was interesting listening to Judy talk about legislation and the responsibilities that flow to everyone from a safety standpoint and training earlier. But in irrigation systems, there's not so much legislation sitting around that from a legal standpoint. It's more about we're just putting sprinklers in and watering lawns, and it doesn't, I guess, to some extent, people might not think that it overly matters all the time. So I think otherwise. And so at the moment we're seeing, I guess, what I would call a perfect storm where irrigation designs are happening without, and specifications either do or don't exist. There's designs that are done by suitably qualified people versus non-qualified people. The quality of the installations that are happening are on either end of a scale with the intentions of just making things good, or it's a premium turf surface and we want to be the best we possibly can. So we've also got issues with, I guess, water, security at the moment as well. We've got wastewater treatment plants that are costing some councils, $10 to $12 a kilolitre, and we're at $3.76, I think, for mains water at the moment. And we've got obviously budgets and I guess people senior to some of us inside the room today that are looking at what we're spending on sites. I think we need to spend more time thinking about the irrigation specifications and the quality of what's actually going in to get our bang for buck at the other end as well. There's multiple things like contractor skill sets as well that are out there that are impacting our. There's not enough training in. What I tend to see is people that are, I guess, owners of the business, or the owner is employed, let's say, an operations manager, and that person, say, has a certificate 3 or a certificate 4 in irrigation, but the people below them are all general labour, and then they get left to their devices or to make things up as they choose, and the end result is not in the interest of the customer being in this room, local government. So, yeah.
So I guess just by a quick show of hands, who here is concerned that they may be under-specified or under-designed or under-managing their irrigation infrastructure? Is it a big problem? Okay, we can probably go over here. It's all good. We're done.
Yeah.
I think in reality, it's a massive problem, and I think it's potentially as much because we don't know what we don't know. I know that was something that Judy mentioned at the start of her talk, that in a lot of areas, the specification and design of irrigation systems in open spaces is being undermanaged because people don't actually know that it should be managed. And so hopefully by the end of the next 40 minutes, we will give you a really good understanding of what we think matters. And hopefully you can walk away with 1 or 2 things that you might be able to suggest or do differently inside your, well, I was going to say 4 walls, but really the boundaries of your area to ensure that you're best representing the ratepayers and the team that you work with. So,
and I guess probably to add to that is working with a lot of people inside this room as well. We do notice that there's the organisational structure of local government seems to be changing. That landscape seems to be changing as far as I guess what we would have called a pyramid style setup. We're seeing now there's a lot more subcontractor reliance on people, but there's also, I guess, the key personnel that are in council overseeing irrigation projects either one are not privy to being there at the end of a project that gets installed, and then all of a sudden they just handed over a job that they've had no involvement in through tender processes or through building works, and then they're just expected to deal with that. And then when it doesn't work, they're the ones that also have to answer that, which I don't think is right. But they're also, those individuals are also being stretched too thin as well. They're not just looking after this now, they're looking after multiple other people. They've got budget reports to do. Their jobs are far more diverse than they used to be.
So what we'll touch on first is the irrigation specification. Obviously, that's the first document that needs to be established before anything else happens down that line. Talk to me about what makes a good irrigation specification, and then potentially what could go wrong if local government don't have a spec or it's underwritten.
Yep. And obviously, as all of you probably are aware, we are a design firm as well. There is many design firms out there. I personally think over an irrigation design, the most important thing is an irrigation specification. An irrigation spec is the guiding light. It's your recipe. I think the bottom line would be, if you've got a good recipe and a method, most people could cook the meal if they knew what they were doing properly from the start and there was detailed instructions on how to do that. They can't really deviate from that. So, and then, yes, there's many ways you can do an irrigation design, but that specification stays as is. So I would say that an irrigation specification, a good irrigation specification should always highlight, I guess, the type of products that need to be used that are in line with Australian standards or the legislative requirements of the project. They need to have a very, I guess there's probably two parts to it. They need to clearly identify what products you guys as council want to use, and then how they are meant to be put in the ground. So, albeit through typical installation details, like a photo of that, or including I guess a detail on how that's meant to look as well. So, from there, I think there needs to be clear information around why, or I guess, at what point do we want to be stopping and checking that the process of that project has been. So I guess our whole point would be, what does, we go to site, we have a pre-construction meeting, we want to see the backflows have been installed a certain way, a valve box has been installed a certain way, and then we can move on from there. The reason why this is important, I think, is that it keeps council, no matter who's in charge of that, there's a liability back on the contractor to make sure that or an accountability back on the contractor to make sure that it's done properly. But also, it allows, there's no ambiguity around that between the contractor and the council. It's all very clear at the start. This is what our expectations were of you. We've all agreed to it. And then at tender stages, everyone's quoting for the same project. There's not, I guess, a rotten apple versus a shiny version at the end, and they're two different pricing different ends of the scale as well. So a bad specification, and the reason why we have this problem is, and I've seen jobs very recently where the specification that goes in or that doesn't exist, and we've seen them where there is none, and I'm sure there's people in the room now that do have very good specifications and some that may not have one at all. The ones that don't have one at all is these systems are, I guess, it opens it up to the contractor to put whatever they choose in, and there's no clawback for the council to come back to the contractor if it's of a very poor standard, and you were to go back, there's no documentation that says they had to do otherwise. And so what happens is, as a community or as a taxpayer or ratepayer, they've spent $50,000 to $300,000 on an irrigation upgrade that was technically no better off than the 30-year-old system that was already in there. And so now you then got to, in your position, go back to the powers to be and say, can I have another 50 or 60 and do it again? So, which obviously doesn't happen, and then that gets put through another 30-year cycle. So,
I think it's interesting, you touched on before the local government using contracting probably more than they have done. And this is probably not a new thing. It's probably in the recent 10 years more than the recent 2 years. But obviously everyone's under-resourced and stretched, and having a written specification can reduce the stress and anxiety of managing those contractors, because you do have that document that you can refer back to and go, it's no different to policy and procedure inside the workplace. And Matt and I were talking about this last week just in preparation, and Matt was saying it's amazing what documents do get managed well in local government. And if you think about your work health safety, or the stuff that Judy was touching on earlier today around education and well-being, those kind of documents are very highly likely managed well and stored. People were talking about the different platforms they use to store that information. This should be treated with a similar level of care and seriousness because of the potential risks that occur with an underdeveloped spec.
Yeah, we have, there's councils in this room now that have, I would say, from what I could think about, it would be 4 or 5 specs that are, I guess, inside the industry that I don't think there's any, as we see with OHS documents or policies that you guys have, there's document control, there's release 1, 2, 3. We don't see enough. I guess these documents are now obsolete. We want you to use a new one. If I was to be quite open about it, I think, and we were talking about this earlier in the week, from what I have seen openly, I think the City of Adelaide have, and I invite everyone to jump online and I can give you the links to that, but the City of Adelaide Irrigation Technical Specification is an online available resource. So for us as a designer, we go on there knowing that that's the most updated document that's available. All the technical specifications are there. They don't need to be attached to irrigation designs because they're available there. The rule book's there. The design accompanies that. Any contractor at any point can go jump on there, refer back to it, and as long as they're building the design in line with those specifications, there's no ambiguity around it. So I do invite it, for us, it makes our job a lot easier as well. So
I guess Matthew mentioned before that we are an irrigation design firm, and this is similar to, I guess, Judy's conversation. It's hard for us not to talk about what we do, but it's also important that we highlight that in our views, an irrigation industry is a better industry with a written spec. It doesn't mean that you need to engage Waterpro to be involved in that. There's plenty of companies that can do it, and with, I guess, the advancement of AI, you could probably do it yourself. And Matthew's just mentioned a resource that's available. If you want to go find some inspiration, you might find some inspiration over there. But I guess if the people in the room are looking to develop their own spec, what do you see as the most essential elements of that spec, and what, I guess, a must includes and must-haves?
Yeah, I guess as I said before, specs are a two-pillar approach. So what products are going in your site, albeit your control systems, your valves, your wiring types, all that sort of stuff is key, and that's needs to be at a high level discussion as well, not necessarily the opinion of one person that wants a certain product inside the council. I think it's got to be the best. I'm also open to not necessarily standardizing everything on one brand. I think we're in a day and age now where you can have brand A as control and brand B as valves and brand C as sprinklers. It doesn't matter as long as we've standardized on that. And then the second part of that pillar would be, how does it go in the ground? So I was going to say, we've got some manufacturers that don't agree with it.
Or you could just remove that manufacturer from all the specs and they won't be unhappy.
So the next pillar is obviously how does that go in the ground, and what does very, very clearly, what depth is the valves coming up out of the ground? How do we want the valve boxes? What type of valve boxes? It's a recipe.
And that's a CAD drawing more than a written description.
Correct. And even to the point of, like, I don't see a problem with seeing CAD drawings that are accompanied with an actual photo of a sound install to give some reference point. And then we use that in hold points. And so the next part of that would be hold points, having a clear list of hold points of a system, where it be 1 through to, say, 12 different hold points, right through to the final inspection prior to making that PC payment to the contractor, allowing you guys as council members to be able to come out and see the sites, an authorised representative to inspect the hold points and make sure that they've gone in, certain valves gone in the right way. Take a photo of it. The correct documentation process happens. Yes, this is how we want to see this station valve. We can move on. Then if we get down the path in 3 months' time and we see the last two valves, the ball valves, which I have seen, ball valves outside of the valve boxes, then that's not in line with the previous photos. Dig it up, do it again. There's no arguments for variation fees, which is another point. This also helps keep jobs variations down to a minimum, and keeps it on budget as well.
And obviously, the less approvals that are required, the faster these installs should be really happening. If they get free and clear access to the site, the spec's nice and clear, they're not going back to ask for clarification. Yeah,
most of the sites that are for the people inside this room these are community sites where they don't want temp fencing up around them, and they need to be back to site, and they need to be of a safe standard. So these delay, it's not just about financials, it's about community involvement and getting them back out there. So yeah.
When we were discussing this, you mentioned the reality is an irrigation design shouldn't have any installation details on it.
I think a good irrigation design should be locations of pipe and sprinklers and a legend to dictate what is what on a drawing, with zero design technical details, on the exception of a custom pump set or something that's specific to that site that doesn't match the technical specification, but generally speaking, an irrigation specification should be able to have detail for everything that you would come across for your local council irrigation design.
Is there anyone here that doesn't have a written spec that wasn't even aware that you shouldn't have, that you might need one, or there's no one? You don't have a written spec? Do you have an idea, is it budgetary or is it just that it's never been considered?
We've got infrastructure that was put in the 70s.
Yep, so that then you're either trying to retrospectively write a spec to match your infrastructure or write a new spec for the future infrastructure.
I think I'm going back to write a new spec.
Yep.
And then standardise it from there.
The next question that I had here, and I'm just conscious of time, I don't want to spend too much time on spec, but it was that, how should local government approach those costs, or the cost implications or the potential costs of writing a spec? I guess a strong spec written by a design house is probably going to cost $5 to $10,000, including CAD drawings. What's your view on that?
A spec being more than $10,000 to develop. As far as getting it across the line for the powers to be,
if there's a view in the business unit that it's too expensive or it's an unnecessary cost, what's your view on that?
Case studies would be a great way and we can always assist with a case study as well, but showing someone, because a spec, a lack of spec or the lack of quality of specification wasn't up to a standard. This has now cost us X in variation fees, and on one project, had we had a spec, this would have been avoided, and the compounding flow on for the next 30 to 50 jobs that happen would have all been prevented. So a lot of the time, and we used to do this with schools as well, we're talking about everything comes down to budgets and money at the end of the day. So if you can, we're not trying to sell to the business managers, this is how good your grass is going to look. That's not their interest. But if we can turn around and say, we can get an asset in the ground, and by minimizing the costs, we need to do X, that's the key. It's I guess, work with the people that are going to make the decisions on what's their driver. And if it's money, then we need to work with its monetary reasons as well.
So once we've got an established specification, the next thing in the line of irrigation infrastructure development is a design. Why is a design critical? Obviously, we've talked about spec, and then what are the potential consequences of a design not being done properly or not being done at all, potentially, or even being left to a designer construct, which we're seeing a lot of?
Yeah, I guess I've been a massive advocate for, in an ideal world, and I know Caesar's nodding his head now as well, but I would love to see not a single designer construct in the industry at all. I cringe when I see an irrigation or a landscape plan come out for a major development or a major sporting area or what have you that's design and construct, which means it's had zero consultation from council around that 90% of the time. It opens it up to, I guess, potentially, let's say, a shop that's got excess stock or a good bulk deal on a product or something like that, that goes, well, let's get that into this job because we can make good money on that and we can move it through, and that has no driver as to what you guys actually wanted or needed. You don't carry the parts for that. There's an import product that is a one-off build that no one, all of a sudden you're stuck with that for 25 years and you can't maintain it. By having a design done, it just keeps that everyone's quoting the same job. Yeah, from a tender standpoint as well, it's apples for apples. And it's something we've always argued. We might see across if we want to do project management on some of these jobs too, the variations in pricing for supply and install, and then the supply component is vastly different, which means you can't put a system in that's got an oval that should require 150 sprinklers and then there's only 40 on a job. Like, that means something's got to give there. And so a design just keeps that all level playing field.
Talk to us about the long-term, I guess, cost implications of doing a design where you're under under sprinklered, for lack of a better way of speaking English. You know, we've seen designs where a DNC's come up where they've just put sprinklers down one side of a verge. You know, what happens after that if you want to keep that turf area green?
There's multiple things that happen, but I mean, what we normally tend to see is 9 times out of 10, an inefficient design is probably only 20% reduction in material. So the small amount of dollar value that's savings that's allowed someone to win a tender has compounding problems for the let's say a turf surface moving down the path, where we've got councils now in this room that are doing fertigation systems with wetting agents through systems. Now the uniformity of that system putting out a wetting agent could be completely pointless if it's an inefficient system. So you're wasting wetting agent, not putting it where it needs to go. We're not putting, we've got compaction in areas that aren't getting correct water. It becomes public safety issues where Adelaide's Bay Visco soils, in schools and small ovals, you lose small children down some of the cracks that appear in the middle of the summer we've just had. So there's so many compounding problems that can come up, and again, all because we wanted to cut corners or get something done by a 20% saving. So
and I'm not sure, I might need some help from people in the room, but is that, I guess, is DNC something that you're seeing increasingly in your areas, and is it a concern, and do you have any control over that? Obviously, there's a lot of development happening. I mean, I think about Playford specifically because we have such a strong relationship with the development that's working out there. Is it a case that the designs the developers are just taking control of that? Is that why a design might go to DNC, or does anyone have anything on that? No. I guess if we use that Playford as an example, obviously the fact that there's such a strong specification in that council area ensures that even if there is a DNC done, that it's at a certain standard, or it has to be before it gets installed, right?
Yeah, and I guess using Playford as a great example there was, I guess for when we see designs that we've either done or we've quoted supply for designs that have been done by others, we know that there's accountability loops on the back of that, and it became this standard that we knew individuals in City of Playford would be out there at the completion of a project, and they're checking this to make sure it goes in properly. Which I think holds the actual industry to a higher level as well. And then we start to see the contractors that are going there that might not have done well at practical completion stage are doing far better now, because they go, I'm doing a job for Playford, I'm going to have to execute this one well to be able to get paid at the end of the job. Yeah.
So on the design side of things, I'm kind of going a bit off script here because I'm conscious of time and making sure that we bring as much value to the people in the room as possible. Talk to me about GPS and the usage of that now from a design management, or I guess a design rollout standpoint, and then how that ties in with as-builds, which we often hear that term thrown around, but rarely have, I guess, contact from contractors around actually doing an as-built properly.
Yeah, so on the GPS side of things, obviously a vast majority of people are using GPS, or would be using GPS if it's been designed by a design firm. These systems, if a GPS as-built has been done, all designs, in my opinion, should be geospatially referenced, meaning that they have an XY coordinate to them. That data gets loaded into your asset registers. You've got events coming out. We know exactly the way that technology is acting now. You can put that irrigation design back on a tablet or on your phone, and your events crew can walk around and know exactly where pipes are in the ground. Don't put start droppers here, avoid things. There's less maintenance costs. Just extends the life of those systems. And then I think when at the construction phase, GPSing allows us and many other design firms to be able to bring that GPS back out, peg out the system by putting the flags where the sprinklers and the valves are. It keeps that accuracy down. And then while we're out there, we highlight any issues that we might find as we're doing it. And then that keeps that variation or likelihood down this is going back probably 12 years ago now, but you'd build a golf course out with, $2.9 to $3 million system with a golf course. By doing the GPS, we're able to keep the variations down to about 3.5% of the job. So whilst that's still an amount of money, compared to someone out there with a tape wheel, measuring off of trees and what have you. It just doesn't work. So
I laughed because we were in the US and watched them peg out a golf course irrigation system with 3 people and 3 pieces of string, and they were just walking down the golf course fairway, running triangles.
And their mindset was that the 3 imported staff members,
low cost labour,
were
they're not there anymore.
Were significantly cheaper than the cost of a GPS and the subscription. So we're just going to run that. So
yeah, well he said, "Oh, this is just better this way."
Yeah.
So I don't think the guy knew how to use a GPS unit.
And then obviously from an as-built standpoint, I think it's important. We're seeing systems, and our design team will see it all the time. We will design something from 75% through to construction issue and tender to issue drawings, and we rarely get asked, if ever, to come back and produce as constructed plans. And there's people in this room now that will know, one, do you have an as-built? It's either, more often than not, no, or it's been built by the guys that have gone out there and walked the sites and tried to basically make one yourself. Or 2, the as-built that you have has no reference to what's actually in the ground because the contractors have cut corners or have said
a PDF.
Yeah, and often we'll get asked to produce an as-built sometimes, and I'll say, oh, that's cool. Would you want us to come out to site and we'll do a check? No, it's exactly as per the plan. Just change it to as-built on the drawing, and then I'll get asked, funny enough, to come back 2 years later to do an audit because I don't know why it's not working, and it's literally like looking at 2 different sites. The drawing I have has no reference to what's actually out there. So, and then again, by that point, contractor's being paid. Everyone's left. That contractor might not even exist anymore, and you're now asking them for money to rectify.
So,
and you own this data. One thing you should always be pushing for your designer, whether you use Waterpro or any other reputable designer, is these PDFs are your drawings. You've paid for them. They belong to you, and then the GPS data that's behind that's also yours. So some may say no to giving it to you. Just push. It's yours. Let it go into your asset registers and keep it because it's invaluable information. So
I think what you're going to find in a very short amount of time is that AI will start to pop its head up in irrigation design and turf management more so than it is now. I think that with all new technology, it kind of moves its way through the traditional sectors like adult entertainment and then online business and online sales, and then moves through into more non-traditional things like turf management. And so having access to your CAD files is going to be very valuable, and I can't tell you why, because I don't know, but I think there's going to be the potential for you to be able to inject your CAD files into an AI and somehow use that to help manage budgeting and infrastructure management and maintenance management for your systems. And if you've got the last 5 or 7 years of as-builts stored somewhere, then you're going to be that 5 or 7 years ahead. Because the one thing it can't do, well, it might be able to do, but is to go retrospectively build them out without too much cost. So we've only got about 11 minutes left of your Q&A. I just wanted to touch on the installation side of things. Now, traditionally and never, Waterpro don't have an installation division. It's something that we consciously choose to stay out of. I find it confusing to have an irrigation store try to sell irrigation equipment to a customer that they're competing with. But we do have relationships with a lot of installers, and we see the good, the bad, and the ugly of installation. Currently, we have a very, very under-resourced installation world, and obviously some of the councils in the room have started to take that back, and they're working on installing the systems themselves. Talk to me about what are the key points that local government need to focus on if they can around managing installations and interacting with installers of these very expensive infrastructure projects?
Yeah, I think it probably goes back to probably what was said at the start of the discussion with I think it's important to have good relationships with your installers, your install crews as well, and understand who's working on the site. One thing I don't know if it might happen more than I'm aware of, but pre-construction meetings don't seem to happen very often. And if they do, again, they're not happening with the person that's probably going to end up with the job at the end of it. They're a project manager for, say, a new club room going in, but they've actually got no idea about the irrigation going in there. So the right people need to be brought in. That sets the tone for the expectation for the entire job as well. And then, hey, come see me. I'm the point of contact, making sure that there's safety standards there. What we do see a lot of the time is the long sleeve, the long pants, all that sort of stuff for week 1, but by week 5, exaggerating, but then they're cruising around in thongs, because it's this incremental degradation of safety through the job. So just this constant catch-ups, and the reason and the ability to have the constant catch-ups can be done through hold points. Hold points keeps everyone accountable, keeps the job going to the way that contractor promised that they would price it, and the end result should be exactly where you need it to be. So I would say, if I could, the main takeaways from that I don't see enough of now is hold points on projects and the preparation of as-builts at the end of the jobs, and holding everyone to account at the end of it. I think that's probably the most important thing.
It's interesting you mentioned hold points. I guess I'd be happy to be challenged on this, but I don't know that there'd be anyone that's doing that well, and I don't want to be disrespectful to anyone in the room. It's usually, there's some, and I know I don't want to, I guess, cast a wide brush. I know that there's some people that we deal with that irrigation infrastructure's held at a very high standard, and they are capable to manage that. But I guess, is there anyone in here that's happy to talk about it, that I guess are just getting handed jobs as they're completed and that's it? Is that pretty standard? Yep. As Matt touched on before, it's really, really hard to get that work remediated or repaired if you've already paid the contractor 90% of the project. In a lot of cases, they'll probably happily walk away from that 10 for the potential cost of putting in the right cable or rectifying backflows that have been plumbed into the wrong spot, or not protecting drinking water and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think, and again, I'll go back to the City of Adelaide here, but their specification has a great page on it that has a list of hold points, the level of notice that needs to be given prior to that hold point to the superintendent. By no means am I saying that each hold point has to be an individual visit. Sometimes you could do master valve, flow sensor, backflow, and the first station valve, and leave that all open, and then have that as one hold point visit. I guess I'm sure the City of Adelaide won't mind anyone. There might be some copyright things from word for word, but by all means, have a look at it. I'm a true believer that a rising tide raises all ships. So, and I want to see the standard of the industry, I guess, take irrigation seriously, and the end result won't be just financial gain, but we've got much more enjoyable playing surfaces to get people outside as well.
It's surely a nicer job to come to each day when you're not continuously fighting with contractors as well, and when it's clearly stated this is how it needs to go in. We all agreed on it. It's been paid for, and you're not arguing. I mean, we deal with less arguments than probably most businesses, because we just refuse to deal with, well, in general, commercial builders. But I don't know how you can manage that day to day, having to go to work every day and argue to have the job done well. It doesn't make sense.
I would assume that it would be a case that they don't have those arguments. They just avoid them. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, that's right. So then the job just gets installed, it gets handed over. Right. So for everyone in the room who is potentially handling irrigation infrastructure or management of contractors, what are some tips that we can, I guess, send these people home with around things that they should be looking out for that maybe aren't traditionally looked at, or common wool that gets pulled over the eyes of the inexperienced when it comes to irrigation infrastructure installation?
I'd say the class ratings of pipes we're seeing a little bit of at the moment, where as councils are specifying class 12 pipes as the standard across everything,
including sub-main.
including submain. Yep. Just to keep one standard of pipe, which I'm all for, because I think there's a level there where it keeps there's one pipe that's getting used from a maintenance standpoint as well. I think the quality of the valves or where it's coming from might be more specific around the actual branding of the valve as well. That might change. We see ball valve being specified, but not necessarily a brand. So you got a PVC valve in the back of a valve box. That's all the other jobs have been brass. So they've cut corners and stuff. So 1 mil cable down from 1.5 is a common one as well. If some of you may be aware, but if you're looking in a valve box, it can be difficult to determine 1 to 1.5 sometimes if it's in the 600 down below. And then probably some red flags would be just to make sure that if you're seeing your contractors leaving site over periods of time and then coming back periodically, or different people are on site, that's going to more than likely result in varied finish quality as well. So just to be aware of it.
Yeah, I think of the most recent commercial liquidations I've watched, there's been large volumes of staff departing sites for long periods and then large volumes coming back, and having 20 or 30 staff on a site to try and rush to get it finished.
It could go the other way. Yeah, we end up with there was 10 people on the site, and all of a sudden they've pulled in all these people to try and close jobs out, or they're buying up large amounts all at once to get it in.
So I guess I'm conscious of time, so I want to talk about the things that we're seeing from a testing standpoint upon completion. So obviously in the world of irrigation design and infrastructure, most firms will have an auditing service where you can have a full audit of a system. I know that we've had, very early conversations with a council in the room about potentially auditing their irrigation infrastructure upon completion. That's obviously a cost that could be quite high when you're trying to argue for another $3,000 to $5,000 to audit a system, and I'm talking a full audit. What could the people in the room do around, I guess, a mini audit or a condition assessment, or even just some basic tests to make sure that the system that's gone in well is as intended before they sign off on their final bill?
Yeah, and I think this is something that could be listed in a specification at the end of a project as well. This is the things that we will check for at completion prior to final payments being made, but would be your learn flows. Most sites that we're seeing now are running flow sensors on them. I think it's important that we check the actual flow rates that the system's giving us against what's actually on the drawings, and then adjust run times or flow management accordingly. I think if it's a multi-core system, doing resistance tests against your coils just to make sure that all your wire joins are sound, you haven't got any problematic coils there. One thing I don't think happens at all, or very rarely, is Dakota systems going in, having grounds resistance tests on the lightning rods. They need to be a 12 monthly thing, majority of the time for grounding rods, and then before they even get down, they're between sort of 10 or 15 ohms sort of resistance. I've been to sites where I've tested the grounding rod's great, but there's literally no cable even connected to it. So the rod's just a piece of copper in the ground. But no one was there to check this. So if that got hit by a weather event, that whole system would be fried, and then it would be start again.
I'm laughing. I remember the job that we had a box of Dakotas returned from the contractor, and they weren't sure what they were for. So this full commercial irrigation system had been installed, and they're like, "Yeah, this was
lightning.
This was all leftover," and we're like, "Yeah, that's not leftover. You meant to put them in."
Yeah. But we have jobs that are 60 rolls of drip tube go out for the site, which matches the flow rates that are given, and I'll get 25 to 30 rolls of drip tube come back, and I'll query, "Are you sure that's right? Did they reduce the size of the garden beds?" No, it's exactly as per the plan. I'll go and do a learn flow, and the flows are half the amount, and everyone's just incrementally spaced out these drip stations and bring back $20,000 worth of drip tube. So I'm sure that credit's not getting applied back to you guys as well. So
we just lost all our customers.
Yeah.
So two things. I'm conscious of time, but I did make lunch 15 minutes longer than I did last year because I was not sure how this speech and the last speech was going to go from a timing standpoint. There's a bit more here, but I don't want to labour on it if there is questions in the room. Does anyone have any questions around this or any comments that they want to make around how things are happening or, what's going on in their world, or talk about something that you've maybe done differently inside your business unit that's helped? No questions? Everyone just wants to eat, I think. Two more. I've got time. The food's not ready anyway, right? Yeah.
I think one thing I just want to finalise with for everyone is you might have staff inside your walls that are very capable of writing a spec as well, and something that I guess I'm not saying just us as Waterpro can offer, but a reputable irrigation design firm should be able to do for you is become an advisory panel or be an advisor for the spec as well. Come in and sit down and we can dry build valve sets with you and see what's best in the ground and actually talk and get a result that way as well. It doesn't have to be rewrite the exact spec.
We've peer reviewed specs before, and it might be something that you do have someone that's capable of doing, and then we just have an hour or two where we review it and kind of pick holes in it and act as a challenging contractor. Why is that his hand? Can you stand on a chair?
It's important to have that spec in place, but the other thing is too is constantly looking to update it as well. So as your infrastructure changes, as the manufacturer upgrade their products, we go through elements of change consistently. So making sure that's part of your process as well. It isn't very easy for contractors to fall back onto that and go, well.
We actually talked about that, and it'd be in this document somewhere. I was a bit concerned that we'd probably not have enough to talk about, and we've definitely gone the other way. One of the things that we're seeing around that from a specification standpoint is not just that it's not being updated regularly, because obviously, the high quality manufacturers are evolving their products continuously, but sometimes there's specifications and designs where something that doesn't get brought into the country gets put in, and we're seeing that where more so from design companies that don't necessarily supply irrigation as well, that there'll be a pressure reducer or a flow or a nozzle in a sprinkler that doesn't actually get imported into Australia or manufactured as a BSP thread, and they're getting drawn on there. So having a shop or having a company peer review your spec might help you pick up something like that you maybe haven't thought about. Yeah. So wherever you're storing all the other documents we talked about before with the reminder pop-ups, set a 12-month reminder on your spec and maybe keep your eye on that. And we are a business that exists because we make profit, and without profit we wouldn't exist, but we are definitely not a business that's only focused on that. And so if you do need help, there are people here today that you can talk to, and you'll probably find that there's people that don't work for Waterpro in this room as well that will be more than happy to help. That one of the core reasons behind open spaces was to create an environment for people to connect with each other and share ideas. And I know in past years we've had a bunch of guys drive from one council area into another one to look at how they're managing aquifer recharge or how they're managing, adding inputs to their water. And so make sure you, if you can, and you don't have to, but take the breaks today. We've got big breaks to go talk to people that you might have met before. And if you are wanting to be introduced to someone, Adam Mudge is sitting at the back there underneath that piping Shrike picture. He knows everyone in the room, so if you want an introduction, go talk to him or one of us, and we can introduce you to those people, and you might find that you learn something new or develop a new skill that you didn't have before. One other thing on a training standpoint, you'll get an email from us at some point soon. I didn't want to promote it too heavily before today, but we're doing a full day irrigation training session on the 30th of July at Angle Park. That's something that will be what's called Irrigation Essentials. It's a comprehensive irrigation training. There's no hands-on, but it'll be effectively a lecture for a whole day around irrigation from start to finish. I think we've got 130 seats. We've sold 50 seats already. If that's something that you might be interested in for your anyone in your team,
Fully catered.
it's fully catered. That's Well, if you've been to a Waterpro event, you're pretty across the catering side of things. But there's a taco truck if that helps get anyone over the line. Thank you so much, Matt. It's been good for you to give your insight to everyone. I'm lucky enough to get to work with this guy every day, and I think that he brings a lot of value to the industry. So it's been good to have him up here. I do have a gift for you over there. Here it comes. So there, see, you do a talk, you get a gift.